Tonight, the topic of what I'm going to be talking about is doing the right thing. First of all, have you ever had a bad day? A really, really bad day. Nothing goes right. If you think you've had a bad day, consider the testimony of this person as he attempts to explain his accident to an insurance company. I'm writing in response to your request for additional information. In block number 3 of the accident report form, I put poor planning as the cause of my accident. You said in your letter that I should explain more, and I trust that the following details are sufficient. I'm a bricklayer by trade. On the day of the accident, I was working alone on the roof of a near 6-story building. When I completed my work, I discovered that I had about 500 pounds of brick left over. Rather than carry the bricks down by hand, I decided to lower them in a barrel by using a pulley, which fortunately was attached to the side of the building at the 6th floor. Securing the rope at the ground level, I went up to the roof, swung the barrel out, and loaded the bricks into it. Then I went back to the ground and untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure a slow descent of the 500 pounds of bricks. You will note in block number 11 of the accident report form that I weigh 175 pounds. Due to my surprise at being jerked off of the ground so suddenly, I lost my presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded at the rather rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explains the fractured skull and broken collarbone. Slowed only slightly. I continued my rapid ascent, not stopping until the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep into the pulley. Fortunately, by this time I had regained my presence of mind and was able to hold tightly to the rope in spite of my pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground and the bottom fell out of it. To avoid the weight of the bricks, the barrel now weighed approximately 50 pounds. I refer to you again, the weight in block number 11, 175 pounds. As you might imagine, I began a rapid descent down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the 2 fractured ankles and lacerations of my leg and lower body. The encounter with the barrel slowed me enough to lessen my injuries when I fell onto the pile of bricks. Unfortunately, only 3 vertebrae were cracked, and I'm sorry to report, however, that as I lay there in the bricks in pain, unable to move, and watching the barrel 6 stories above, I again lost my presence of mind. I let go of the rope. Today, we're going to give consideration to someone that kept having bad days. I think we can all relate, even though our situation is not the same. What makes this person so interesting is in the midst of these difficult situations, he shows tremendous courage. His name is Joseph. We find out about him in Exodus 39. When we first come across Joseph, we note that he is the favorite son of Jacob. He is such a favorite that Jacob buys him a very expensive colored coat that makes the other brothers crazy. They become very jealous. They become envious. And you see, Joseph had a sibling problem. They were all very jealous that Joseph had received a very beautiful coat, but perhaps what made it worse was the dreams that Joseph kept having. These dreams were prophecies of greatness. These dreams consisted of places of leadership, even over his own brothers. Needless to say, the brothers did not receive the reports about these dreams so well. I mean, imagine about your brother or sister having reign over you in a couple years. How would you take your brother or sister dreaming about that? You would say, that doesn't sound right. Especially when you're older than them. Seeing an opportunity to be rid of his annoyance, though, they took Joseph prisoner. They had had enough, and they cast him into a pit to die. And then one of his brothers, the eldest, Reuben, interceded for a change of plans. Reuben said, instead of leaving Joseph to die, we'll sell him to the Ishmaelites. We will make him a slave. He thinks he can reign over us. We'll show him. The Ishmaelites take him to Egypt. And that brings us to where we are in Genesis 39. That is just a little bit of a backstory. So we will break down the story of Joseph in Genesis 39 into 6 sections that will show how he handled adversity. The first section is promotion. That is my first P, promotion. Verses 1 through 6, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord make all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sakes, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. When Joseph reached Egypt, we believe he was about 17 years old. The Ishmaelites sold him to a man named Potiphar. And Potiphar was no ordinary man. He came into Egyptian leadership. He was up near the top. For Potiphar was head of the military wing that guarded the Pharaoh. So if anything was going wrong, it was Potiphar's head that would be on a stake. So Joseph is forced to leave a life of a shepherd farmer and becomes a servant in an Egyptian household. Does everybody understand where we're at right now? It is here he learns new customs. It is here that he learns proper speech. It is here that he learns new languages. And he will become familiar with hieroglyphics. This isn't just an ordinary role. Joseph here is being trained for a very diverse program. And immediately Joseph shows a flair of administration. His administration skills were put to work, and became clear to Potiphar that he had gotten a bargain. He said, I just got a slave that will work for me, but here's Joseph, a guy that knows how to lead, a guy that can learn new things. And the text tells us that he did well. Everything that Joseph managed was done better than it had ever been done before. There is a relationship between God's presence and God's blessings. The Lord was with Joseph. Joseph knew prosperity because God was with him. We know prosperity when God is with us. It was not anything that Joseph had done per se. It was because God was blessing him. The text also makes it clear that this was no ordinary prosperity. It was extraordinary. It was unexpected. But it was also very obvious. For even Potiphar had to acknowledge that God was with Joseph. And Potiphar's not the type of guy that just does that with anybody. Think about the people in your life. Are there people in your life that probably shouldn't give you credit, that say, I see that God is with them. I see that God is watching over them. I don't know how they got through this situation, but God has their hand over them. The second section is proposition. Verses 7 through 10. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me, but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. Let's get it right from the start. Joseph was a good-looking guy. Joseph, when he went in people's presence, he was noticed. Joseph probably sang like a Donny Osborne. He was the guy that everybody got their attention. He probably looked much like Donny Osmond. Everybody stared at him. The girls would go crazy for this guy. You combine this with great leadership skills. You combine this with knowing a lot of knowledge. And look out. This guy was something special. But with his good looks, there did come a problem. For the wrong girl was after Joseph. It was a married woman, Potiphar's wife. And it is here we learn that it is difficult, but possible, to say no. The text tells us that he was pressured day after day. He was being hounded by this woman who was working to break down his resistance. She even made eyes at him, encouraging him to come her side. It was convenient. It was compelling. But Joseph said no. I'm not speaking on behalf of adultery here, but has there ever been something in your life that looks pretty good that you probably shouldn't have? When I say that, the first thing that comes to mind is food. Slice of cake. Just one. It's never that easy, is it? You see, Joseph had a wholehearted trust in God's purpose for him. We must do the same. We must have a trust, for a wholehearted trust in God's purpose for us. And if he had possessed any doubt about it, it was gone as the purpose was confirmed with God's blessing. When God has a hand over us, we must obey God. We must follow God's will. And I think Joseph was convinced that God had chosen him to rule. He would not sin against God. And even though we won't ever rule over communities or palaces or kingdoms or community or cities, I don't think we need to say yes to the devil's little desserts, as I call it. And Joseph, this would be no ordinary no, by the way. We can, sure, his hormones were in good shape. He was a young stud, as you could call it. But he honored God more than he honored the flesh, more than he honored lust. Giving into this brazen woman would have been easy. It was the way of the flesh. Would have been very easily. Just like that second slice of cake. And that third slice of cake would be very easy. Trust me. Very easy. But he said no. He didn't say no and then play yes. He honored God. He recognized that this proposition by Potiphar's wife was a wicked violation. Not only was it against God's rules, but it was against the rules of marriage, the vows they had once made. No one can fulfill his or her divine destiny by disobeying God. So the third section, purity. Verses 11 and 12. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Joseph teaches us, well, hear that. When temptation comes, it is time to move quickly. It is time to get away from whatever is tempting us. The text tells us that she had maneuvered the situation so that they we're alone. Joseph doesn't hang around to see what else will come of it. I'll give you an example. There was a fight over there at the gas station yesterday. 5, 6, 7 people that were up to no good. Dad said, I'm tired of the foolishness. Call the police. You don't sit around and wait for bad things to happen and occur without doing anything. First of all, you handle the situation correctly, and then you flee from it. You don't go over there and say, hey guys, what's up? That's a very dumb thing to do. You sit over here, you observe, you do the right thing, and then you walk away from it. You don't hang around and wait for bad things to happen in your life. If there is something bad going on right now, flee from it. Go to the closet in prayer. Joseph teaches us that when temptation comes, it is a time to move quickly. The text tells us that she had maneuvered the situation to where they're alone. Does everybody understand that? She engineered an opportunity to entice him. Sin does just that. Sin entices us. You know how easily he could have said, why not? I'm a man. She's a woman. It's a nice arrangement. But he says no. After all, I could use a little affection, right? No. He says no. This is not how Joseph understood it. He understood it to be harmful to his soul. It was a wicked thing. So when she boldly grabs him, he flees. When sin boldly grabs you, you flee. He runs, although next time I would encourage him to grab his coat when he runs. The fourth section is perjury. Verses 13 and 18. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he had heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. Verse 16, and she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. I think I repeated it there. One of the things here is that when love is spurned, it quickly turns to hate. Seeing that she is not going to get her way with Joseph, she makes up a story. Potiphar's wife makes false accusations. She accuses him of doing the very thing she did. She says that he tried to take advantage of her. Fortunately, she had frightened him away by screaming. It was, by the way, screaming that nobody heard because nobody was around. And to prove she held the evidence in her hot little hand, here's this coat to prove it. Now, I'm not saying up here that anybody has gone through this and this is why I'm preaching on it. What I'm saying, we are going to have bad days. The devil will get us to do things and put us in a situation where we may or may not be accused of committing a sin. The perception of sin, in my eyes, is still a sin. If you are doing something wrong and other people perceive it as something you should not be doing, to me, that's just as bad as a sin. The perception of a Christian must come out as being a Christian. Now the fifth section, now that we've read perjury, the fifth section is punishment. Verses 19 and 20, and it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him, and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. There was a preacher, just to kind of take a side track from this, there was a preacher who returned home from a trip, and one of his laymen met him at the train station. The preacher asked how things were going. He said, "Well, while you were gone, a tornado came through town and tore my house down." Preacher said, "Well, I'm going to be honest with you. That was God's punishment for the way you've been living." The layman said, "Well, preacher, it blew your house down too." I think we can say this: sin always has consequences. No matter what we do, sin has consequences. God doesn't punish us, but He allows things to happen to test our faith. It is just the meaning behind those consequences that we have to be careful about. The response in our story is predictable. Potiphar is angry. He's very angry. And there does not seem to be any questioning. And I find that rather funny that Potiphar doesn't question Joseph. And you have to wonder if this type of pattern has happened before. But interestingly, it was a crime punishable by death in that time. Yet he was put in the prison where the political prisoners were kept. He goes from the penthouse to the jailhouse. And do you know where the new location was? Potiphar's house. He goes downstairs to the dungeon in Potiphar's house. A crime punishable by death, and he just goes to a dungeon. You say, God, He did the right thing. He fled from sin. He said no to your law. How could you put him in jail? You're looking at it wrong. God spared his life because He did the right thing. We talk about my testimony of getting into a car accident that I should not have survived. I could say, God, why did you do this? But I could also say, God, you spared me for my purpose. Think about what's gone on in your life. Where has God spared you? Where has God looked out for you? Or are you looking at it the wrong way? What makes this so hard is that it was utterly unjust for Joseph to go to jail. But what would have been even more unjust? Him dying for following God's will. He should be blessed for obeying God, right? Not punished. The one that should be suffering is Potiphar's wife, not him. So why does why does obedience have to be so unpleasant? That's my sixth and final section is prosperity. Verse 21 through 23. But the Lord was with Joseph and shewed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prisoner. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were kept in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. We learn here that God does not forget us. Even in the midst of our suffering, Joseph is held in prison because he did the right thing. He fled the temptation to do the wrong thing. And instead of being honored, he's punished. It is a lesson we need to learn as Christians. For pain and suffering is inevitable. If someone tells you they are not, they are lying to you. We all go through pain and suffering. But what do we do in the midst of it all? We keep obeying God. Joseph seemed to keep his perspective. He had been in prison before. If God could raise him then, he could do it now, and God does so. Let's apply this to our lives. The application here is me asking you this. Are you dedicated to the calling that God has in your life? Are you as dedicated as Joseph was to fulfill the God-given destiny he has given you? If you are, then realize this. We must have the courage to do the right thing. We must have the courage to do the right thing even if there are immediate consequences or less than desirable. Joseph was victorious. There was a bump in the road, but he was still victorious. God always has something bigger in mind than what we see. And if there is hard times going on in your life right now, wait it out. If you are obeying God, you will be victorious. And we cannot lose sight that wrong is wrong, no matter what the circumstances are. Wrong is wrong even if you don't get caught. Wrong is wrong even if you think you're doing it for a good cause. Wrong is wrong even if others are doing worse things. Wrong is wrong even if it doesn't bother the conscience. Wrong is wrong even if others consider it acceptable. We must have the courage to do right. We must be determined to live a life characterized by moral excellence. For Joseph, he experienced the fulfillment of God's promises. Do you wish to do the same this evening? It's a question only you can answer. Let's close in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for everything you do for us, Lord. Please let us live a life that is obeying you, regardless of what the end thing to do is, regardless of what everybody else is doing, Lord. Let us just live for you. Let us obey you and honor you. And most of all, Lord, just convict our lives to do the right thing. Whether we want to or not, just overcome our hearts so much that we have to do what you want us to do. Let us continue to be examples for the kids next door. Let us continue to be examples for the world that looks at us. Let us have a good rest of the night and a good rest of the week and come back safely on Sunday. In Jesus' name, amen.